But today, we are happy to have Bill George. So All That Glitters is a thoughtful, fresh review of the California Gold Rush, and truly no one is better at bringing history to life through sight, sound, picture than Bill George. Bill is a former KCRA-TV journalist, and not surprisingly, he specializes in picture and sound when it comes to interpreting historic events. He has produced 6 documentaries on California history, including the story of the building of the First Transcontinental Railroad. And he has produced a film on California's Chinese pioneers and a multi-part series on the history of California agriculture. His films have been shown to hundreds of civic, school, and historical groups and are shown on PBS. That's all very, very impressive. He does it all, and we're really, really excited to have him here with us today. So I'm going to turn things over to Bill. Bill, thanks for being here. And now it is your chance to wow us with what you've got. Thanks so much.
Thank you, James. I'll try to wow. So thank everybody for being here. It's such a busy day today. Not only might the San Francisco Giants clinch the Western Division Championship today, but there's innumerable great football games on. And of course, the weather's beautiful this time of year. So there's many, many competing things to do. So I really do truly thank everyone who has come to hear this. My goal today is to give really a broad overview of the gold rush. And a lot of this is based on questions that I get. As James mentioned, I do lots and lots of presentations. And even if they're about the Transcontinental Railroad or the Chinese builders of Gold Mountain or whatever, the questions invariably get back to the gold rush. So I try to build this presentation based really on those types of questions and answer some of the fundamental questions that you get by people in a general sense. Of course, I'm aware that interpretations of history are changing, especially in the last few years. Things are being reappraised. Things are being looked at, history is being looked at from different angles, untold stories. And I welcome that. I think all historians should welcome that. And I think attention does need to be paid to areas where it wasn't before. So I have tried to reach out in that regard too. There's always more to learn, more to do. And a topic like the gold rush is so huge that it's just always a challenge to present everything. Well, with that being said, let's go here. And James, I hope this works. The magic of Zoom. And are we seeing the full screen? I guess so. So I'll go ahead. The California Gold Rush, 1848. All that glitters is not gold. So I always try to set this up, and I find that even today, this needs to be restated because we're suddenly in the Bitcoin era. Money is fungible these days. Money is electronic. Gold doesn't mean as much as it did years ago to the modern person. So why is gold important? Why is it something that everybody wanted and esteemed to get? So of course, gold lasts forever. It never tarnishes. And that's why in ancient civilizations, it was highly valued. AU2, that's the gold symbol. So if you see somebody driving around with their vanity plates and it says AU2 for me and you or something, they're talking about gold. That's the chemical designation, the periodic table of the elements designation for gold. It's very malleable. It's something that you can take and pound into incredibly thinness without it losing its strength. It's just an amazing, amazing element. And
so
of course,
Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt. You are uber eloquent and you don't need a PowerPoint, but you want to use a PowerPoint, right? Have you put it up yet? Okay, so did you share it?
Thought I had, but if you're not seeing it, I haven't. So
okay.
I do have good pictures, I promise.
Yeah. So there should be a green share screen button down at the base.
Yeah, it's funny, we just rehearsed this and
It's all right, folks. We are going to get this.
I've done this many times. Somehow let's see. So you don't see the full screen now.
Right. Yeah. And how's that? There should be, yeah, so down at the base of the screen there, what do you see? There should be a black strip just running horizontally just down at the base.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
And if you click on share screen, there's a little arrow.
I see you.
Okay.
See the participants, but I don't see. Okay, here it is. Ta-da.
There we go.
Okay, sorry about that, folks. We rehearsed too many times, James. We had a
we did.
All right, so I won't repeat what I said here. And we'll go right to where we were. And so there's a big old gold nugget you should see. And then, like I said, gold has been valued since ancient times. And you see the various coinage, diadems, crowns. The Egyptians, of course, were renowned for gold. So it was extremely important in the ancient world. And it was extremely important worldwide. It was every culture throughout the world valued gold. Princesses and kings all around the world. This was a sign of more than just wealth, but of authority, of royalty, of prestige. Even in India, you see these elephants with religious significance, the gold bands on their trunks. And knowing that I'm of a certain age, Princess Kelly of Monaco wore gold, and many movie stars of the 50s and 60s were often draped in gold. That was their fashion symbol, so signs of beauty and elegance. So let's go to California, the gold rush period. So Sacramento, and here Sutter's Fort, was really the center of Mexican California, what was called Alta California. And the man, of course, was General John Sutter. At least he called himself a general, called himself a colonel, called himself many different things. A fascinating character. And was here settling the Sacramento Valley, or integrating into the Sacramento Valley, we could say, before the discovery of gold. He had his own private fort, and this was not just something thrown up. This was the most powerful military establishment in California at the time. The Mexican government was centered in Alta California, was centered in Monterey. It had nowhere near the firepower that John Sutter did. Sutter actually had the largest contingent of cannon in Northern California, in Alta California. Cannon that actually came from Napoleon. When the Russians pushed Napoleon out of Russia back to Paris, they confiscated his cannon. And then because the Russians were at Fort Ross in California, the cannon were transferred there, and Sutter himself ended up with it. And I read in the Bee, I think, or somewhere recently, a couple months ago, they actually found some cannonballs in the area of Sutter's Fort in some of the neighborhoods. So our historical presence continues to be felt. In 1846, the Bear Flag Rebellion occurred, and settlers from around Sacramento Valley overthrew the government, really, of Mexico, which was controlling the area, and declared themselves an independent state. And the Mexican-American War, of course, came along. The United States defeated Mexico, and all of this land in green there was transferred from Mexico to the United States. You see just a huge area. A lot of people don't realize, they think it was just California, as you can see there, all the way into Utah, Nevada, of course, and huge, huge area. that came into possession of the United States. And it was just a few weeks after that land was deeded to the United States or ceded to the United States that gold was discovered in Coloma, which is just 50 miles east of Sacramento. Of course, it was called Sutter's Mill, a property owned by John Sutter, given to him by the land grant by the Mexican government before the war with the United States. And James Marshall was the man who stumbled upon, if you will, found the gold in the mill race at Coloma. There's a picture of him, one of the few pictures of James Marshall standing below the mill, which looks like it's about to collapse. So when that photo was taken, I think in the 1890s or something. Marshall was a very interesting character, and people would come up to him after the discovery of gold, and they would touch him. They thought he had some magic powers. They also thought he was holding out. They thought that he knew where the actual mother lode was. So to them, they thought there was an actual huge cache, if you will, of gold, and that little pieces were flaking off it. And they were insistent that Marshall knew where it was, and people would follow him around. So he had a kind of a difficult existence. And here is the mother lode that we're talking about. In lore, in movies, in almost anything you can think of, this is just an unbelievable area. And I'm going to circle it here, as you can see in red, I hope. So this whole area, Butte County, which was an area of tremendous gold finds, then it kind of cuts into here, and then down through these counties, the Mariposa, all the way into what is today Yosemite. So that's the gold region, the gold country, the mother lode. It's got many, many names, and has gone through many iterations and evolutions since the discovery of gold. It became a huge logging area, and other minerals were mined from there. And today, I think it's probably best known for some of these horrific fires we've had, which is terrible news, but they are getting through it, we hope, in that area. That region will continue to be viable. The American River, where gold was found, and it's important to understand that gold is a heavy metal. It sinks to the bottom. If it didn't sink to the bottom, I don't think gold would have ever been discovered in California. I'm sure it would at some point. But because of the fact that it was along the bottom, it would wash up, gather along the sides of the rivers and creeks, and be scooped out. And so why it wasn't found before it was discovered by John Marshall, I'll never know, but a very strange occurrence. So the squatters actually destroyed John Sutter's empire. Sutter had visions of an agricultural empire. His land grant started in Sacramento, went all the way up to the Sutter Buttes. He had a place along the river called Hawk Farm, where he grew all kinds of goods. He had the mill, which was designed to mill wheat, and that was his view. But the squatters of the gold rush flooded in. They overran his properties and took almost everything that he owned. He was not a very good businessman, that's acknowledged, and he did not scoop up lots of the gold for some reason. He did not end up with a huge fortune. This is a picture of him standing in front of his house in the east. It's in Pennsylvania, not far outside of Washington, D.C. He moved there in the 1860s and 70s after his lands had been overrun. And a lot of accounts say that he ended up living in poverty. That's not true. This was actually the nicest house in the town. You can see a nice two-story brick. It had central heating, which was very rare in those days. He was visited by people, very prominent people, including William Tecumseh Sherman, the great Civil War general, who came to visit him, and Bancroft, the historian, who came to interview him and get his thoughts on early California. He went to Washington a lot from his house. He actually died in Washington, D.C. He was seeking redress for the fact that his lands had been overrun, but also for the fact that the United States military, under the guise of John C. Fremont, had confiscated some of his horses, some of the materials, weapons, and he had never been repaid for them. So he never did get repaid really by the federal government to the end of his days. But once he died, he was acclaimed by many people in the country and in California as being the dominant person who had allowed the American settlement of the state of California. So off he passes into history. The guy who did get rich is this guy, and we'll talk about him a little more later. This is Sam Brannan, and a very, very interesting figure, a Mormon who came out here before the gold rush, ended up in Sacramento, ended up really being the main publicist of the gold rush. Once he had heard that it had been discovered, he, others like Sutter were trying to keep it quiet. You'd have to say that that's a secret that in no way could be kept unless the people other than one person were all dead, because news is going to leak out. But he very actively promoted it and was known for going through the streets of San Francisco yelling, "Gold, gold, gold in the American River." Now, he did not actually start the gold rush, even though he tried to make it big news. It wasn't until President Polk said that the gold mine discovery was real, and he got military reports. He told the military, go into the foothills, survey this, let me know, is there really gold? Is there a lot of gold? And he wrote a report. A report was written and delivered by the president, and that went throughout the United States. And at that point, really about mid-1848 or so, that's when the actual gold rush began. And everyone rushed to California. Just loved some of the artwork from that era. You'll see this one for the clipper ships, how to get from New York to California. Everybody was a race, and they knew that if they got here too late, they wouldn't be able to find much gold. You can see the painting. Here's this guy waving at the ship, I guess, welcoming other people, although that probably wasn't true. They probably weren't too happy that more competition was flowing in. And you see the workers on the left-hand side. They appear to be Chinese workers. They are, of course, digging, looking for gold. And that kind of reflects what happened. Again, it wasn't just people from the United States who were coming. It was people from around the world, including southern China. And it was actually much quicker to get here from the Hong Kong region of China than it was from the East Coast. And you see that here an ad for steamer ships, ways to get here. You could sail around the Horn of South America. You could try to get through the canal at there wasn't a canal, through the land bridge in Nicaragua, other ways. So there are 4 major ways to get to California. 250,000 people arrived in just a few years for the gold rush. This is the largest free migration of people in the history of the world. And again, from all over, from Paris, France, from Czechoslovakia, from everywhere, South America, Argentina, and of course, Mexico. Everybody got here as quickly as they could. And here you'll see, it's kind of hard to read the approximate travel times, but here he talks about the routes. Liverpool to New York City. Well, that took you 138 days. Route to Independence, Missouri, to Sacramento, 120 to 160 days. Of course, that's trekking across the country. As I said, Hong Kong to Sacramento, just 32 days. Australia to Sacramento, 52 days, on and on. So Sacramento, as seen in this illustration, for a time was really the center, the locus, the focus of the world. And there we are shortly, probably early 1849, this kind of etching a picture of Sacramento as it sprung up from nothing. These are some of the first buildings, mainly wooden buildings. There are some tents in here. So it was a canvas city, a wood city, and it sprang up instantly. And it took a few years, but quickly, really, in terms of history, evolved in a kind of a substantial city of old Sacramento, Sacramento City it was called, and with substantial brick.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
I prefer not. I prefer to hold questions.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I think the people of Sacramento were visionaries, and oops, let me go back. one of the things that I saw in a film that was done, trying to get my red pen to work here. Anyway, oops. If you look at the buildings, look at the windows on the second floor. First of all, you see the porches on the second floor. These are kind of Louisiana-ish type structures, New Orleans-ish type structures, but you see the windows, how high arching they are. That was done purposely so that the people who were working on them could look out over the Sacramento Valley and see the Sierra. It was a very kind of inspirational device for them. So they had vision, they had knowledge, and then they had art. And the people that came to Sacramento, it was a very impressive list of people. World famous musicians, opera singers, artists, and entertainers all came. People wanted to see this. It was something unprecedented in the history of the world. And they flocked to Sacramento really to take it all in. Year beware. Well, what's this place? Here's San Francisco right before the gold rush, 1846, 1847, some hills, some sand dunes, some wooden structures, a lot of ships in the harbor. Some of those could have been British or French. They were all very interesting, and the word that was used in those days was intriguing. They were intriguing, or they were vying for control of California. So frequently these ships would come. Some were trader ships too. But France, for example, had a major naval base in South America, not too far away. All very interesting what's going on here. So there's humble San Francisco, and then boom, instant city. Look at that. They even took some of the ships that came in, just pulled them ashore and made them buildings, worked right out of them. So there goes San Francisco. The Overland Trek. Okay, this of course is celebrated in lore, song, literally songs about it, plays, movies, everything. And I like to have this picture of a young woman, because in my readings, and there's of course, anybody who would like to get an overview on reading needs to get Gary Kurtz's book, which is a compilation of all the journals and diaries that have been written. It's just an amazing resource. So you get that, and you can really find lots and lots of stories, the diaries, the journals. And of course, they had time to write those because they were coming overland. And not a lot of entertainment on that Overland Trek. But I like to have a woman here because one of my readings of the diaries is that the United States was in I wouldn't call it a depression during this period of time, but we had not yet become anywhere near the economic colossus that we would become during the Industrial Revolution. A lot of men lived on farms, remote farms. They weren't making much money. It was subsistence agriculture. Cities like Chicago don't begin to really become the transportation hub of the country until the 1850s. So agriculture movement, the Erie Canal comes in, and then the Illinois Ship Canal, which connects Chicago and the Midwest to the rest of the country, come in. But still, it's kind of a slow, boring, and torturous life. So the men get excited when they hear about gold. They get gold fever. They're done with the backbreaking work. And I think anybody wants to understand that, just understand the life of Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln worked on a farm. He hated it. He was a very smart guy, obviously. He did not want to spend his life working in agriculture on a farm or in a small town. He wanted to get out. And thousands of men like that wanted to get out. So the guys got the great idea, let's go to the gold rush. Honey, pack up the kids, maybe. Usually they wouldn't come with kids, but if they did, some did. Pack up the goods and let's go. Well, about a quarter of the way across, the men began to get a little squeamish, kind of like, oh my God, we can't do this. This is stupid. I've made a bad decision. And time after time, the women are the ones that said, no, you said we're going to do this and we're going to do it. And I'll have further evidence of that as we go along. Hundreds of miles walking, thousands of miles walking from Independence, which is where the huge trains of Argonauts, as they like to call themselves, gathered and people would get there. They raced to get there. They raced to buy livestock and cattle to make their trip. And I call this the hard road west because A, it was a hard road, but it's the title of a book that I believe is the best book written on the Western migration. It's a book that combines the geology and the personal narratives of people and the geography of the trip, and also just gives a great impression of how this was like dropping from the world of the Midwest and the East, which had rainfall, had lush green fields, had a growing season, had abundant water, into the new environment that they were going through, mountains and deserts, Nevada, what is today Nevada. And it really gives you a great impression how it was literally like being dropped into another world, and how the pioneers dealt with that in every aspect of their lives, including religion. Here they go, 2 mountain ranges ago, of course, the Rockies, which were relatively easy when they had discovered South Pass, which was kind of an easy way over the Rockies. And then of course, the Sierra Nevada, which was a whole nother story, and just an unbelievably challenging accomplishment to get up and over the Sierra Nevada. Anybody who's been to Donner Summit, if you look at it coming from the east, you really see the challenge of getting over that mountain. Just get on Donner Lake someday and paddle around, and you'll see that mountain rising up before you. You wonder how anybody got over it. People made fun of the 49ers. I said they were celebrated in song, they were, but they were also mocked. And so if you can see this, here's one of the magazines of the day making fun of this guy. He's got his pot on his head. He's got his shovel, pickaxe, and he's carrying a suitcase. And so they were, a lot of the people that didn't go thought they were insane and crazy, and enjoyed kind of, making fun of those that undertook this kind of courageous trek across the country. Sarah Royce, now she's one of those that, excuse me, a little water here. She did walk the 1,500 miles with her husband and her 2-year-old daughter, Mary. She is one, if you read her diary, it's very clear that she is the one who wears the pants in the family. Again, they get to Kansas City area, Independence. Her husband can't decide what kind of stock he wants to buy, horses, oxen, what does he want? She makes the decisions. They get going, and it's very apparent that she's the one who has determination and grit, and she's going to go. She knows her daughter is really in peril, as anybody is on this trip, but could imagine with a 2-year-old. And they come across, and they get separated from the wagon train that they're in. This in late September, October, and I think it was 1850. And they are literally the last ones to get across the pass before the snow flies. And if it weren't for the cavalry literally coming to the rescue, the United States cavalry, they get to a point in the mountains, and the wagon train people say, well, there's one wagon left out there. It's got a man, a woman, and a 2-year-old. And the officer in charge of it's just 3 or 4 scouts. He says, well, my orders say that we can't go any further east than this. And one of the women in the party says, let me see your orders. She takes them, rips them up, and says, go after them. And the soldiers, the horse riders say, well, they've got young kids too. They're in their 20s. They're really young men. And they go down the mountain. Sarah Royce sees them and says she felt like they were angels coming down the hill to rescue them. She's the mother of Josiah Royce. Josiah Royce has been lost to history, really, unless you're really into philosophy. But he is one of the great philosophers of 19th century America. So, and very important historian in his own right. So interesting to read about her. She left a great diary and a great journal, I should say, and makes fantastic reading. So, have you heard of Sweet Betsy and Ike from Pike? Now, I'm just shocked because I give all these talks, and I find out that people don't know the song. So excuse me, but I'm going to sing a few bars. Have you ever heard of Sweet Betsy from Pike, who crossed the wide prairie with her lover, Ike? Now, I don't know if any of you learned that song when you were children. I did. And I always heard that it was with her husband, Ike. Well, no, sorry, her lover, Ike. And again, here's kind of a cartoon of it. I love to show this because I get a lot of presentations to schools. And some of the words, you know, they cross with a Shanghai rooster, a dog, and a spotted Shanghai hog, a Shanghai rooster and a spotted hog. And here they are going west. But the words aren't just a children's words. They'll tell you the story of, again, how Ike is not determined, Betsy is. And this song, by the way, was written and performed in those days in the 1850s, part of what was called the Gold Rush Songbook. But it's him. And when they get to Placerville, old Placerville, she says, or the song says, she dumps Ike and she goes for a much more sturdy figure and presumably marries him. So it's a great story. Look up that song if you haven't heard it in a while. There's different versions of the words floating around. Some are quite bawdy, unnecessarily so, I think, but you will find the lyrics are not a children's lyrics in most cases, and tell the story of a strong woman making it happen, overcoming the obstacles while her lover kind of cringes literally underneath the wagon, and they get to California. As I said, the oxen were the real heroes of the story. A lot of the Westerns you see, they always show the horse trains. They don't show the oxen. So I wanted to give these guys a little love. They're the ones who were strong and sturdy and got through almost every obstacle, over every obstacle that there was. Could go long time without water. When they smelled the water, they lead the pioneers to where the water was, no matter if it was buried under sand or rock or whatever, they would find the way and brought the people out. The Native Americans suffered. This is what we're talking about, appraisals of American history. And of course, that's not a story that was told in many of the classic, Gold Rush 49er hero stories, but it's obviously a fact. And it was tragic. It was literally two worlds colliding, and much to the detriment and of the natives at the time. This is Governor Peter Burnett, California's first governor. Actually, was governor before we were part of the United States. And these are his words that he gave in his State of the Union, State of the State address, January of 1851. He issued a rather, I would say, thoughtful report, if I could say that. You should read it. You can find it online. He explains the whole situation. He doesn't say that, that the whites are exempt from blame. In fact, he says, what he says is, in situations like that, where one civilization, the Western civilization, came in and basically appropriated all of the natives' food sources and other things, that warfare was going to be inevitable. And it was. There were raids back and forth. And he writes there that, in his opinion, that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct. Very, very harsh terms stated here. Certainly it was almost came true. 100,000 California natives died. These are all estimates. By 1873 or so, only 30,000 people had remained. And this was after the Indians had suffered from the diseases brought from the fur trappers in the 1840s. So it had been 40, 50 years of really suffering and for the native peoples. Indian Grinding Rock State Park near Volcano is a great place to go and visit to get an idea of what the cultures were like. In preparing this talk, James had put this on a history site on Facebook. And somebody wrote in and said, well, what about the Maidu? Well, it wasn't just the Maidu, right? There were lots of tribes and bands, the Miwok, the Kankau, the Nisenan, the Washoe, the Yakuts, just other few names of some of the bands and tribes. And they all shared this area near Indian Grinding Rock State Park today. And it's fascinating to go there and see it, see the buildings that they lived in. This is a roundhouse and some of the encampments that they lived in, and to see where they ground the acorns. And this is the largest collection of bedrock holes in North America at the park. And you can see where they actually ground the acorns down for food into a mush or a meal, if you will. And it's really something to walk around there. It's a big park, a great interpretive historians on site to walk you through what life was like. And being in the foothills, as it is near Volcano, it's a beautiful site, gives you an idea of the culture of the natives at the time. Just a close-up of some of the holes. There was considerable romance both at the time of the gold rush, and then years went on, year after year. And here you see a very idealized image of a miner. Contrast that to the one we saw before with the guy with the pot on his head. And this, you know, here he is, all stately. His boots look to be polished, his shirt's tucked in. Boy, he's just gonna walk out there like it's a day in the park and start scooping up gold. And sure enough, there he is again, you know, very, very cool, calm and collected, just scooping up some rocks, and doesn't look like it's hard work at all. And many people did think it would be easy coming out here to find gold. And in some cases, it actually was. There were gold nuggets just laying around to be plucked for the taking. And when they would stick their pans into the river, a lot of times it would come up with lots and lots of gold dust. Here's a studio picture. Now, obviously, this was not, you have to remember, photography to what they call daguerreotypes was just coming into existence. So taking these pictures was hard. So this was probably taken some years after the gold rush in a studio somewhere. And you see this guy all neat and tidy and also looking a little bit older. But the reality was a lot different and captured in this image. And here you can see people digging in the river. You see the crude tents that they erected along the river, and the look on the guy's face with the pan, that doesn't look like he's having a lot of fun shoveling. So that more accurately reflected the reality of the hard work in what they called the gold mines. Although you can see here, this isn't really a mine, this is river prospecting. You can see the women up to the right there at the top of the picture, established camp, probably cooking and assisting the miners. Gold or fool's gold? Well, people found out. And there was a good line that said that if you stuck your pan in there and you shook it out, hopefully you would find a smile of gold. And a smile of gold is just what it sounds like, just a thin layer, like a smile in one corner or one half of the pan. And that's what you ended up with. So it took lots of smiles of gold to make anything. It was a rough land. Here you get a look at the topography as they dig in, also some of the tools that were being used. Obviously, this is a posed photo that was then colorized some years later. Look what I found. Well, nothing in this case, but again, there are the miners. Again, I liked again the beard and everything. And the image was, why were these guys pictured at this age? Well, again, a lot of the pictures, even though this looks to me like it was staged more modernly, a lot of the pictures were of gold miners 30 and 40 years later, and not at the time when they were actually mining. Again, old timers, artwork, everything. But the reality was they were mainly young men, young, ambitious, strong, full of energy. And again, they came out here and then went immediately to work, either panning in the rivers or shoveling in the hillsides. And you can see this is a pretty rough looking crew of guys. I mean, you don't really want to mess with them. And that's really, I think, a very accurate image of the gold rushers, of the 49ers at the time. And remember, into the rivers, and you do it today, some of you probably have done it, that water is cold. It's coming right out of the mountains. And with our weather, with 100-degree summer days, you're baking on top and your limbs are freezing in the river. So frankly, I've done gold panning for fun a few times. And after about an hour, I'm pretty much done. I mean, it's just a rough way to get through the day. Here's some picture of men and women. They're working a sluice. That's the big sluice box you see at the bottom there. The woman doesn't look like she's actually mining. She might have laundry in that basket, not sure. But a lot of women opened up laundries and earned a very good living, either cooking or doing the laundry for the 49ers. And here you see black and white miners at this picture from the Auburn area at the time, for the 1850s. California came into the Union as a free state, although blacks were not seen as being the equal of whites at the time. But there was considerable interaction in the gold fields. There were some African Americans who were enslaved at the time, and they would be brought out here by slaveholders and forced to dig for gold. And that was very troubling to many of the gold miners who came from other parts of the country. They actually resented it and tried to stop it. Now, it wasn't so altruistic as we might think. They simply did not want competition from black gold miners, certainly not from slave gold miners. They felt that they couldn't compete against it. And that's the reason, really, rather than racial equality or any desire for that, that they opposed slavery. And you see Chinese and American miners working here, again, in the Auburn area. Famous, this is a very famous picture of the gold rush. And as I said, the Chinese came from Hong Kong here. And I think it's a very interesting story. I did a film on it called Chinese Builders of Gold Mountain, about the period from 1850 to 1880. And there was a lot of interaction between the races. It wasn't equal, obviously. There was prejudice, obviously. But in many cases, Chinese did very well in America. They established what is widely regarded to be the first trans-Pacific trade. There were not just Chinese miners, there were also Chinese merchants. And because of its proximity to China, those merchants were able to ship goods into the state quickly, cheaply, and efficiently. Some of the first building materials were shipped from China to the United States. Now, as I said, there were laws enacted against the Chinese. There was a foreign miners tax that was largely leveled at the Chinese, but many of them did manage to become wealthy. And they would go on from China to the United States, to California. It wasn't even America, the United States at that time, it was before statehood. And make their money, go back to China, and in some cases come back again. So there was a circular trade that developed. So everybody wanted the gold. Again, here's an African-American miner. River tools. Here we get a good look at some of the implements that were used by the gold miners. In the background, you see that kind of water wheel thing. So that was used to scoop up. It was kind of a primitive dredge, if you will. You can see the tailings at the right there, and it would dump them on, and then they go through those tailings and look for the gold. You see the shovels, the pickaxes, the pans, the rocker panels, everything that they had to try and use to get the gold. There's a rocker panel, again, kind of a primitive. You put it in dirt at top, you shake it free, and again, because gold's heavy, it hopefully stays in those panels and does not flush out into the water stream, and you pocket your gold and go on. Working away, again, we see the primitive, tough conditions. The digging, the picks, a very, very hard existence. Digging for gold. I love how these gold discs are enhanced, just in case you didn't know what it was. Slant mining, different types of mining. Once the easy gold was found in fields and streams, now it was time to dig into the hillside. So here they are on a slant. You can see they've got a horse rigged up to like a car. So they go into the mine, dig at the end of the mine, hopefully find gold, put it in that car, and then wheel it out. And you can see, oops, sorry. You can see obviously a Chinese man standing there along with the rest of them. So again, people were working together. The Coyote Mine, this was just kind of a hole. I don't know where the term came from, but you'll see it in the literature, who the first guy was, but they would just dig these simple holes and try to dig into the hillsides to find the gold from the top. If you read All Gold Canyon, although that was about Alaska mining, that gives you a good idea of what the miner's life, the solitary miner's life was like as they dug into these hillsides. So the other popular tactic was to divert rivers and streams. So here you can see what they've done. You can see the puddles in the background. They have dammed off a river and they have dried it out, and they are digging into the riverbed. And again, searching for gold. Again, you see the tools, the rocker panels, etc., separating the gold from the dirt. You see the tents all over the place. Again, that's where they lived. Stores you read about, they usually were in tents. Even the pets were looking for gold. Eureka, I found it. Of course, Eureka is the motto of the state of California. And they did find more than 750,000 pounds of gold. Again, I love this idealized picture with the gray bearded, gray haired gold miner holding up his prize nugget. Valuable dust. You hear the term gold dust. Well, gold dust was actually little pieces of gold that they called dust. And they would collect all that, put it in their bags, and then use it as currency. So when they got their dust, they were ready to go do barter, do business. Nice to have a trusty mule. I love this guy. Just out looking for prospect and out in the hills with his mules and his cart, and he's ready to go. Like this one, if somebody did strike it rich, they're going to let you know. So he's got his jug, he's got his bag of gold on it, which I think says $90,000, and his pan. So obviously he repaired to a studio somewhere to show off his fortune. And look how young he is, look how well armed he is, his pistols stuck into his shirt. So he's not to be messed with, just a very rough young man. How much did your gold worth? Is your gold worth? These are the scales. Some of the scales that were used to weigh gold. Of course, there was a lot of dispute. Sometimes these scales would be rigged, but Wells Fargo and other great banking corporations got their start in the West weighing and assaying or measuring the gold. And you see Chinese, if they were often, as it were, forced away from some of the more fertile gold fields, they would go through the tailings. And that's where they found lots of gold. If you go to the museum in Oroville, they've got a very good explanation of how Chinese gold miners transitioned to merchants. And here's the tailings today. You can find them all along the American River. These are in Folsom. Piles and piles of tailings. Probably still some gold in there if you want to dig through it. Private companies minted their own gold coins. There was no mint in California at the time. And so these private companies would get together, or not get together, they would just go and mint their own gold coin. Again, there were disputes over how much actual gold was in individual coins. And but they did come up with a currency. You can still find some of these today. the Ormsby coin. Let's see. Found, they had an operation there in the Eagle Theater, and or next to the Eagle Theater in the alleyway there. And as it says here, only 6 of these coins survived. The legend was that because they were minting these coins, they were really, you know, gold was so plentiful that they were just kind of sloppy with it. And the legend is that lots of gold was flushed into the street there in Old Sacramento. And so if you want to go down there and start digging up the street, maybe you'll find some gold. Ah, what is this? A big water fight? Look at the size of that hose that guy's got. Actually, of course, that is a water cannon. Once the easy gold again was found, Eastern capitalists, they always like to blame Eastern capitalists in the press, put together large companies, and they would buy this equipment and come out and engage in what we call hydraulic mining, actually washing down hillsides and mountains and then gathering up the gold. So you can see the power of that hose. Millions of gallons wore down the mountains. Of course, this caused enormous problems for the state. It washed the hillsides literally into the rivers, and the rivers flowed into the Sacramento River, so they washed into the Yuba and other rivers, actually raised the levels of the rivers. And there was a substance produced that was called slickens. So it was like a slimy, I believe, mass of muck, and it would cover farm fields. I've never found a picture of slickens, and I've been looking for about 4 years. So if anybody's got a lead on that, please let me know. But as I said, it caused an environmental crisis. And the newspapers, the Sacramento Bee among them, and other papers fought against this practice. And they said that this was too bad because it was wiping out agriculture from whenever it would flood and just kill off the crops. So this became the first big environmental battle in California. And the farmers, if you will, or the valleys against the foothills. So it's city of Sacramento, people there, and the farmers in the region were opposed to this practice, where the papers in Nevada City, Auburn, and other foothill towns said, no, we need this. This is our economy. Mining is the lifeblood of California. So a big battle ensued. And ultimately, it went to the Supreme Court of California, which ruled to ban the practice, and it was outlawed, and hydraulic mining came to an end. But just look at size again. Look how they'd swivel around. The technology was amazing. Actually, what is called the world's first long-distance telephone was installed near Malakoff Diggins to relay communications between people at lower altitudes, people at higher altitudes, as to when they needed the water to come down. So all of this was mountain runoff that they would get in the high streams and force down these huge hoses to the water cannon, which were then deployed to wipe out the mountains. You can see them today. The Hendy Giant, you can see up in Nevada City, Grass Valley area, quite a few of them. And this is the landscape today. So the most notorious, if you will, of these operations was called Malakoff Diggins. It's about 25 miles or so, 20 miles or so outside of Nevada City. Beautiful drive up there if you want to go. The state park, it's a state park today. They've done a wonderful job keeping it, not just this, but the actual town itself. But it's like a moonscape, and except more intriguing. And if you walk around, there's actually kind of a rare beauty to it. I did a film on California agriculture, and I explained the whole issue between farming and mining, and as such, spent a lot of time at Malakoff Diggins. It really is something to see, like no other mine that I've seen. Quicksilver. Here's another dangerous legacy, if you will, of the gold rush. So quicksilver is what we call mercury. It was used to separate the gold from the quartz, which was often found in. And this Almaden quicksilver is now a county park. It was one time it was the largest quicksilver or mercury mine in the state. And they're still cleaning it up. It's got a toxic legacy, but they've been able to make it a county park. And then you see the gold in the quicksilver. The hard rock mining, this is the Kennedy mine in Jackson, California. So again, there's still today, as you know, all kinds of gold in the area. It just became harder and harder and harder to get it out. So these giant mines were built, and now we really are mining. We're not scooping gold up anywhere. We're going down. Miners went 5 miles underground. And here is a picture from the 1922 disaster when the mine collapsed. It was an explosion in there, and there were no survivors from that incident. So if you go up to Jackson today, you'll find a cemetery. Most of the miners at this time were immigrants from Eastern Europe. They had come to work in the mines, and this tragedy occurred. It got international publicity, and it was just a really horrible event. Judge Lynch, well, who was Judge Lynch? You'll read in old newspapers that a thief or alleged thief was taken before Judge Lynch and promptly hanged. Well, there was no Judge Lynch. Lynch meant they would lynch the guy, and it was usually as a result of vigilante justice. If you do read the accounts, it's not like they would just randomly sweep up people. They would have a trial. Of course, it wasn't anything like we would do today, but they would have a trial and they would find people guilty, and it was frontier justice. Black Bart is one of the famous names from the gold rush, along with Joaquin Murrieta and other alleged criminals. And this guy got lots of publicity. He became, or not him, but his depictions, the star of stage and screen. And this one, I love it, French film, Les Classiques du Western. Sorry for my French, but it went all around the world years later. And here's his gun that he probably said he never fired, but he used to rob stagecoaches with it. At least it's a replica of his gun. I think it's 14 of 28. And again, becoming a movie legend over several decades. And they finally caught him alive and locked him up for a while. He did get parole and kind of cleaned up his act, but that's a legend of Black Bart. Again, California's first millionaire. Well, he never dug for gold, Sam Brannan. He was smart. He sold axes, pickaxes, pans, and other merchandise to the miners and leveraged that, actually built a spa near Calistoga, several other endeavors. So while John Sutter did not benefit greatly from the gold rush, Sam Brannan did, and as it says, became the first millionaire. Now he did kind of get his comeuppance. He was known as a ladies' man. He got divorced and apparently lost quite a bit of his money in a divorce settlement. So he didn't come out completely unscathed either. Of course, we became a state because of the gold rush. Here's the celebration of statehood in San Francisco, 8th September of 1850, a huge deal. And celebrations all throughout California as we join the Union. The gold country today, well, I would sum it up with their message as tourists wanted. And of course, I alluded to the recent fires, and I just wonder, boy, that's going to have a really bad impact throughout that region. Also, of course, the Tahoe region. But primarily today, after engaging in mining, lumbering, and other things, this has become a tourist region. Some of the roads in the load, I like to say, of course, California 49, named after the 49ers. And what you can see throughout this region, many statues. I like this one up in Auburn of the gold miner. You see the size of it with the kid in the picture. It's a beautiful region and very, I think, conducive to tourism. And of course, the counties there work very hard on bringing tourists to the region. There are more than 100 wineries in the gold country. see them throughout, beautiful vineyards. I like this area better than Napa because this reminds me of Tuscany, the rolling hills here, whereas in Napa you get more of the steeper hills. And plus the wine tasting fees are a lot lower. I paid $5 yesterday at a winery near Plymouth, and in Napa now they're charging up to $100. So go to the wineries near Plymouth, not Napa. Gold coins today. Well, here are what are called double eagles. These are famous coins and collected and sold. It's funny, the marketers of these coins always refer to them as hoards of gold. They never refer to them as batches of gold, collections of gold, finds of gold. It's always a gold hoard. In 1857, the SS Central America sank off the coast of Florida. This was a huge disaster. The captain and 425 people died in this. And $292 million or 19 tons of gold were lost, including ingots, raw gold, coins. A lot of these are on the markets today, and you can see how they package them up. I don't know why this one says $20, but there is a double eagle for $20 you could buy. An eBay price, $11,950. So you got to be very careful about what you're buying. You'll see these guys on television hawking these and telling you how rare they are. So just be careful, buyer beware about what you're doing in the gold coin era. This was a favorite of mine, the Sacramento assayer hoard. Of course, an assayer was somebody who measured and evaluated the gold. So what they've done is taken this so-called hoard of gold. The story was that this assayer in Sacramento, of course, they're never specific about where exactly the guy, what house he lived in. But they said, well, his children found this hoard of gold dust in his house. So apparently in all his assaying, he managed to keep some. And so they packaged up and they sell it online now. So again, it's a hoard. And if you want it, you can find it easily online. I'd say these are nice collector's items, but I'm not sure they're great investment tools. And you can find resources that will help you out. Many books on gold coins out there, so make sure you consult them. Huge gold nuggets are still found. This is the Butte nugget, found in Butte County, worth $400,000 today. This was found it was recently, last 10 years or so. And here in Murphy's, if you've been to the winery down there, at Ironstone Winery, just a huge in quartz gold nugget and worth $4 million. So again, you can still find gold throughout the region. And good luck if you go gold hunting. As I say, I always tell the kids, get your mom and dad together and get your gold pan and head out, and maybe you'll hit pay dirt. So I've got images of school children all over California going back to their parents and convincing them to come up and spend a day looking for gold. And I always tell them, remember, bring your tools because golden retrievers don't retrieve gold. So that's the end of my show, and I will now be happy to entertain any questions. I think we're right about on time, James. So if you want to open it up, feel free.
Okay, gang. Yeah, we are doing just great with time. So if anyone has any questions they want to go ahead and ask.
Thank
Bill?
you. That was wonderful. Bill, I got a question. It seems like the gold there was individual endeavors. There was no really one big company like they do right now in Africa. Is that my understanding? No big companies really dug for gold?
Yeah, and of course that's, any answer is a broad answer. And there were many different configurations of people. But I think safely you can say that the 49ers came out here in companies. They would form a company And in some case, they would pool revenue even, and they would elect a captain, and they'd come out. And then when they got here, they would fall to quarreling, and invariably the companies would fall apart. Now that's a generalization, as I said, there some of them did hang together. But the interesting thing was, I think it's widely agreed, the Chinese did stick together more. They did form companies that would work together, and thus were successful in finding gold. So I would say, yeah, I think you're right. Largely, it was the American individualism that led them to have disputes and break up and go on their own to find gold.
Thank you.
Okay, gang, any more questions? That might be it, Bill. I don't know.
No. I got another question. I'm just letting other people speak up.
Melda's ready. Okay, go ahead.
It is fascinating what the history part. Why is it that you don't see for all the Chinese that lived in that area? Why you don't see that? Nowhere, no reflection of their settlement there, in the foothills.
Oh, why were there no? Well, that's a really great question. And first of all, I would say in Marysville, and I did a film called Chinese Builders of Gold Mountain. And I went to Marysville, and they've got a temple there. And Oroville, they've got a temple there too. Both of those cities or towns had vibrant Chinese communities up through the 1950s and 1960s, I would say. I think what happened in those cases was that, you have to remember, Marysville at one point was the third or fourth largest city in California. Wow. It was a big city. Oroville was a big city. Well, once the gold played out, people left and went to the big cities. So I think that was the same with the Chinese. Now there were, demonstrations against the Chinese in some of these smaller towns, and they were driven out, especially in Truckee. If you read the history of Truckee, there was quite a bit of discrimination against the Chinese in Truckee. But I just think that naturally it would be. And I had one other explanation was given me by a descendant of Chinese gold miners in Marysville, and I was fortunate to find several people that their families had been in America, in California since the gold rush. And you don't think of that, but there are people there. And mainly they're the ones who are involved with the temples and museums and things, but also, other activities. But he told me thought it was a big thing. And I think it was the 1960s when Governor Earl Warren really cracked down on prostitution. And apparently there were some prostitutes in Marysville, and they were all driven out of there, business reasons, I guess, if you want to say. But I think basically it was, there was sentiment against the Chinese in those areas, and they just normally went to San Francisco, big city, to get opportunity.
Bill, you might want to. This is Nancy, and you might want to explain the Exclusion Act.
Yeah, that's after this period of history. Yes, basically they excluded Chinese from emigrating to the United States from China. And as somebody told me, a historian told me, that's why you'd see these lonely old men in towns and in San Francisco with no families, because the families couldn't get over here. There were different ways to get around that. You can read about the Paper Sons, look that up, where they would basically, forge these ways to get into the country. But I think that was, until we normalized or liberalized, I guess the word would be, immigration from China to the United States in the 1960s under Lyndon Johnson. There was really limited immigration from China. If you look at, again, I did this film and I kind of explained it there quickly, but the immigration between China and the United States really went through waves. Early on, anybody could walk into the country, and they did, and were prosperous. And then the backlash against Chinese, mainly by labor unions, the early forms of labor unions in the 1880s, because they felt like they were competing against cheap immigrant labor, stopped it. And then, of course, World War II, we became huge allies with China. And, you know, Pearl Buck, one of the great authors, wrote a lot about it. And Americans kind of had a real fondness for China. After that, there was the cultural revolution in China, and people trying to flee and get here. And then, I guess, as I said, we liberalized immigration with China. And now, who knows where we're headed? Things seems like things are getting a little tense between the two countries once it goes up and back and forth.
Well, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. I learned a lot.
I appreciate it. What's a Giant score, James?
Do we all want the Giants score? Okay, it's 2-1 Giants.
2-1.
2-1, bottom of the 7th. So right. Hang tight, everybody. I think they've got this. All right. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I just want to, one, thank everyone for joining us today. This program is being recorded. We will throw it up on Sacramento History and the Sacramento Public Library YouTube page. Two, Bill, thank you so much for this presentation. It was terrific. And thanks for everything that you do to keep the history alive, keeping that heart pumping blood for all of us to enjoy and to experience. And of course, in your case, through sight and sound. So thanks, everybody. Sacramento Archives Crawl is tomorrow. Be there virtually. Go to facebook.com/SAC Archives Crawl, or you can just go to sacarchivescrawl.com. And then join me next week, October 9th, at 1 o'clock, as we talk about Hoovervilles in Sacramento. So with that said, goodbye, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bill, you're fantastic. You're a treasure. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see everybody again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everybody. Bye-bye.